Hey y'all, this is Kobe R. Rice, and I am back at Rebel Ragdoll Reel in order to give you guys another review of a really great TV series that I like a lot called Scandal. Now, I know that Scandal is not necessarily science fiction and fantasy, but it is in a genre that I really do enjoy, and it's in a genre that Rebel Ragdoll as a company is going to be delving a lot into in the future when it comes to producing our own independent media, whether that's through film, original TV series, online, web series, manga if it falls into it, comics, graphic novels, and novels, etc. So because I love thrillers and I love the thrillers of the political kind, we're going to talk about Scandal, which is undoubtedly one of the hottest shows on television right now. And a lot of the heat with Scandal deals with the fact that not only is it a good show, but it also, one, features a very multicultural and diverse cast, two, has some really awesome acting, and three, it just has a really interesting way of doing plot, sort of I would call it a very new and fresh take on the typical procedural we see on television. As a side note, if you think about it, we have police procedures, legal procedures, and medical procedures. And I'm still trying to figure out how to classify Scandal because I guess it's sort of like a legal procedure, but maybe one episode in the first season or something like that took place in the actual courtroom. I think the rest of the episodes generally tend to take place in Olivia's office, her home, or the client's home. So it's very interesting the way that the mini genre or the mini type of drama of procedural that Shonda Rhimes and Betsy Beers and their team has created. I think that it's a really lovely twist on what we are used to seeing. So I think that that's really awesome too. Put my glasses back on here. I didn't want to put them on so much because there's like a glare from my computer, but I'm going to see if I can try to get an angle that doesn't like put the light right in my face. So I think I found one. So I'm not looking down on you. I'm just trying to get this computer glare out of my eyes so I don't look like, psycho cyber kid. In any case, so back to Scandal. So I think it does a lot of really awesome things. I'm very interested in the characters themselves. Olivia Pope is obviously very fascinating as a character, but all the supporting characters as well. Cyrus is really awesome, his husband James, and their family. And the way that they, as well as the show itself, is redefining and expanding, maybe not necessarily redefining, but definitely expanding people's stereotypical perception of what a conservative white male looks like or conservative family looks like. And I really appreciate that as well. In addition to Cyrus, we have Huck, who's one of my favorite characters, although recently he's sort of been getting on my nerves, and we'll get into that in just a second. But we have Abby, who I really enjoy, David, who he's in my heart. I love David Rosen to pieces. Quinn, who's really cool, and then Harrison, who's always charming and debonair, but who in truth we really don't really know too much about quite yet. So I'll talk about all those things when I talk about the most recent the most recent episodes that we've seen thus far, because I do have some thoughts. And just as a putting this out there for you guys as a PSA, this is a review of literally the first 3 episodes all together. I'm not going to go through each one and review each one for like 10 minutes or something like that, but I'm just going to do sort of a culmination of what I think of season 3 thus far and pick and choose certain things from the first 3 episodes that I really loved and things that I really didn't attach myself to. I wasn't really feeling. So we'll get into that. But a couple of other things that I think that Scandal does really well is, at least in the first 2 seasons, the team really did some excellent storytelling, excellent dialogue. One of the best episodes, I think, personally, that I've seen thus far was 752, that focused on Huck's past and went really deeply into how he became the person he is. And I just adored that episode. It brought me to tears, honestly. And when an episode impacts me like that, where I laugh really hard, or I end up crying, or I get really sort of emotionally affected, that's the point at which I say, this is damn good writing. It's the twisty turny plots, the conflict, the characters, all those things are important and are really well done in Scandal, in my opinion, thus far. But it's the emotional resonance that really makes me attached to a series and root for a series. And that is something that Scandal's been able to do for me. Breaking Bad did fantastically for me. House of Cards was really great with that in certain aspects, because with House of Cards, it's really just like a lot of really upper middle class, ruthless people, just like in Scandal actually, who to a certain degree are still a little bit inaccessible to the everyday person like me. I'm sort of like a broke-ass writer. I don't know anything really about politics from my view, and I've never been a politician, and I've never been a woman of privilege in terms of, being white, having lots of money, and having lots of power. I have privilege in other ways, and that's something that we can get into later, everybody's personal privilege. But generally, when you think of those three things, I don't have those particular experiences. So generally, sitting me down in front of a show like that, it's hard to make that emotional connection that is really going to keep me involved. But House of Cards actually did that very well. But this is not a review on House of Cards. We'll talk about that in another video. But I thought of House of Cards because I feel as though it and Scandal are very good at connecting with its audience in certain ways. And Scandal, while for some people it might be high drama and melodramatic and too soapy, for me it was just the right mix of everything, okay? Just the right hints of high drama, just the right hints of tension, just enough information to keep me engaged and help me understand what's going on, but also make me go, oh my god, what's going to happen next? Just enough cliffhangers, just enough character development. I was very fascinated with all the characters, particularly not just all the ones I mentioned, but particularly Mellie. She had me throughout the entire first season just like totally enchanted. And I really love her character, and I root for her just as strongly as I root for Olivia Pope, to be honest with you. To me, in that situation, the line between bad guy and good guy is very much blurred, and we can talk about that, but I don't want to take up too much of this video's time. But Mellie's character as the wife of President Grant and First Lady, I think she is phenomenal, and I really, really admire her and in the role that she plays. In any case, those are sort of my background feelings on Scandal. I would go more into how I feel about other people's reactions on Scandal, but I have another video that's actually sort of a prequel to this entire review series, and it's called Race, Sex, and Class in Scandal. You can actually check out the video. Ooh, I'll put my finger down here. Check out the video below. I'll put a link to it because I feel like that's important. That's an important one for people to watch before they watch any of my reviews on Scandal. Clearly, I'm a diehard Scandal fan. It doesn't mean that Scandal is above critique because I'm a writer. I love to write, and I'm just going to be honest with the things that work for me and the things that don't work for me. And there are quite a few things in Season 3 right now that are not really working for me, and we'll get into that in just a second. But the reason why I direct you to the video below is because people, I know that there's going to be a certain sector of the population, and they will make themselves known to me and to you as well, who really just despise Scandal. And not necessarily because they just don't like the show. If you don't like the show, your opinion is valid. You don't have to like it. You can think that it's the crappiest show on air, that it's poorly written. You can say all that if you want to. You're entitled to your opinion. Your opinion is far more interesting if you can back it up with certain pieces of evidence or certain scenes, and we can dialogue about it. That's more interesting than you just being a hater or me just being a lover of the show. That's not really interesting. But like us talking about it and why we don't like it and why we do like it is interesting. But I'm not talking about those individuals, like those individuals who are coming on, this page to comment, or on my blog site to comment on whether or not they like Scandal, especially if they don't like it. I'm more than open to hearing people's thoughts, because I love to like debate healthily with people about our likes and dislikes. But there's going to be a certain sector of people who are on this page, aside from the trolls. Like, let's forget about the racist trolls who are going to come on and just spout nonsense. But aside from the trolls, there's a certain sector of people who are going to come on this page just wanting to hate on Scandal for one particular reason. And that reason is that Olivia Pope, who is an African American, very successful, very brilliant, very gorgeous, and very high-powered woman, is having an affair with the President of the United States, who is depicted by Tony Goldwyn, who is a very handsome, stereotypically handsome, powerful white male. And there are a lot of people who are out there who have a really huge issue with the interracial aspect of this show, and the fact that a black woman or a sister is being depicted as a mistress and being glorified for it. Now, I feel like the latter part of that critique can certainly be discussed, and definitely has, some things in it that can be unpacked. But the former part of the critique of a black woman, having a relationship with a white male, there are some people, and I've heard this all over Facebook, all over YouTube, all over, actually amongst my friends and, my acquaintances. There's some people who don't like the relationship because it's an affair, and there are some people who just don't like the relationship because it's an interracial relationship. And I hear a lot of critique and criticism around this. And I hear criticism lobbed at black women, such as myself, who actually really enjoy the series for what it is. And like I said in my other podcast, or rather in my other video cast, Race, Sex, and Class in Scandal, I go into this in much more depth. But I just wanted to sort of put this sort of PSA out there for anybody who wants to come on the page and just like thumb it down or be a hater because, they don't like, interracial dating. This is just fiction. So just remember that, okay? It's a fictional show that represents I'm trying to think of a historical example of, the closest historical example of Olivia Pope and Fitz Grant. And I guess that's, Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson. But I guess that's the closest allegory we can come to. Except, Sally wasn't running her own law firm. She wasn't free. And she wasn't, pretty much owning the world, essentially. And that's not me hating on Sally Hemings, but those are important distinctions to make. Also, Sally Hemings and Tom J were real people, and Olivia Pope and Fitz are not. So just put that out there, for anybody who wants to be a hater. This is just fiction. Relax, calm down, all right? If you're going to come on and just sort of be a hater, that's cool, but, your fervor to address, the issues between Olivia and Fitz, or like hate on it, I think can be sort of better used elsewhere, like actually solving like a real world problem, like poverty or actual racism in the real world. And that's not to say that fiction is not impactful, but I just want to put that, caveat and PSA out there in case people get too crazy on this video. Okay, so that was my, sort of rather long PSA. Okay, so anyway, we're going to move on. Let's get into the actual critique of Season 3. What I like. The pilot episode, honestly, I liked it. It wasn't as, awe-inspiring as I was expecting it to be. And that's not because it wasn't a good episode. It's just because maybe I was building it up in my head because I had absolutely been blown away by Seasons 1 and 2. I mean, I literally could not stop watching it, you know. And I, when I was in school and also teaching, I had to force myself to not watch it during the week. Otherwise, I just wouldn't really get any work done, because you could just sit and binge on Netflix or on Amazon's, you know, video streaming site and just have a blast. And I would have done that to my detriment, much to my detriment. But so season 3, episode 1, the pilot. You know, it solved some questions. But to be very honest with you, one thing that I didn't feel was really accurate, or I didn't feel like was in sync with character, was Olivia's father. I liked his dialogue. I enjoyed a lot of the very sort of how do I say this? He's very brooding. He's very malicious. He's very threatening, but he's very calm. You know, he's dangerous in a very calm and placid way. And that pretty much maintained itself all throughout season 2. And then suddenly, he's getting like super dramatic and super loud, somewhat unnecessarily in the first episode. And I just didn't feel like that fell into line with his character. I feel like the director of that particular episode should have let the father be who he was the entire time, because I felt like that whole first scene between Olivia and her dad in episode 1, I feel as though that was overdone a little bit. The dialogue was great, but the dialogue in and of itself was powerful enough without the yelling, without the gesticulation, that we could be impacted by it without him having to come out of character and sort of be like kind of insane. And the way he reacted in the first episode towards Olivia's secret getting out is a very stark contrast to how we saw him in episode 2, when we were seeing the flashbacks of the relationship between Olivia and her father. And there was a point, by the way, obviously these reviews are going to have lots of spoilers in them, so I'll let you know when a spoiler is coming up. So just make sure that if you haven't watched it, either go watch it or like don't listen to what I'm going to say. But anyway, so Olivia and her father were in the restaurant, and we saw multiple scenes with them, you know, trying to rekindle their relationship. Olivia was not being supportive because she was still mad at him. She still had her fatherly issues with him after he sent her away to boarding school after her mother died. And so the entire time he's been calm, placid, smart, you know, poised. And then she finds out throughout this flashback that Huck and her father have some kind of connection, because, you know, I'm not going to go into the whole situation, but eventually, you know, Huck, who at this point is a homeless guy in the DC subway, he saved Olivia, and then he sort of explains away in sort of like a crazy psycho-Bible manner that he was a part of this team called B613, and, you know, whatever. So, and basically the place that he had to go, that he was trained at, was called Wonderland and Acme or whatever. And Olivia eventually puts it together and realizes that her father is involved with B613. He is not only involved, but he is the leader of this. We've known this the entire time. Olivia found this out sort of earlier on. But essentially, there's a scene, because Huck, after he tells her this, he disappears from the subway, and she has a suspicion that her father has taken him. All right, so she confronts him at one of their typical Sunday dinners at a restaurant, and he basically, in a very dangerous, like, just again, that smooth bedside manner that he has, in very deadly tone, explains to her that she is not to ask him any kinds of questions like that. And that is how I just paraphrase what he said is literally a paraphrase. The dialogue in that scene was awesome as well. What he says is very interesting and very powerful, but it's also very deadly. And that's how I have always seen his character, as sort of this swimming silent shark. So when he went from shark to freaking, like, I don't know, just loud flamboyant pelican or something, or loud flamboyant flamingo in the first episode, I was like, what is this? Like, this is not how Mr. Pope roles. Like he is the silent shark. He's the silent killer. He doesn't announce himself or reveal his cards or whatever. And he and Olivia are a lot alike in that way. But so yeah, that was just my one point as to how I believe that that his character wasn't consistent, and I just think that he's much better and much more powerful as a character when he's just like, chill. Um, the Huck storyline, I feel as though we got a lot of great mileage out of that in the second season. And I love how we saw the more tender side of Huck when he fell in love with the assassin, but she betrayed him, and that was fucked up. That was actually a very good episode, actually. Very tragic for how she betrayed him. If you haven't seen it, you have to go see it. But, I feel like his storyline was developed really fantastically. And, where we left off in the second season with Huck was that he was sort of cracking up. He just is like becoming more unstable. And what I expected to happen in season 3 was for him to just sort of disappear and fall off the face of the planet while he got himself together or whatever. And instead, he's sort of trying to stay in the mix, and it's not really working. And that's fine. It's fine for it not to work. But suddenly now, his presence in Olivia's world has become, from my view, incredibly melodramatic. In terms of like all the I feel like it's in the entire season 3 thus far, in many ways, not in all ways, has become sort of melodramatic. And not in a way that's sort of keeping me enraptured. And I don't like saying these kinds of things about Scandal because I love it so much. I still will watch it every Thursday. I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to support it. But again, I'm a writer, and I love it to bits. But I'm going to just mention and critique the things that don't really work for me. I think we should either go a different direction with Huck's story personally, or sort of get off that train and let him sort of get himself together. But something's got to give, okay? Episode 2, I think out of all 3 that we've seen thus far, I think it was episode 2 that was the best one. And the way it ended was perfect. Jake Ballard shows up at her door. Not shows up, he's literally dropped off by her father's henchmen or whoever. And we've been wondering what the hell happened to him since, the second to last episode in the last season. But he's okay. Our baby is fine. And, he's chilling. In episode 3, we start off with a client, with one of Olivia's clients, and we see nothing of do I keep calling him Jack Ballard? Jake Ballard, sorry. Oh my God. My Jake Ballard fangirls are going to kill me. I love him too, but for whatever reason, he's like Jack in my mind. I don't know. Anyway, we see nothing of Jake Ballard for like the entire first half of the episode, which I guess might be okay. Maybe they were trying to do that to build up tension, but it just didn't work for me. They weren't building tension, in my opinion. It seemed like somebody was being like neglectful in the editing room or whatever. I don't know. It might have just been like a way to build tension, but for me, again, it just didn't work. I was like, okay, like we started off with the client now, and we see Olivia in her office, but the last time we saw Olivia was that she was crouching over a crumpled and decrepit Jake Ballard in her doorway. You know what I'm saying? So what's the problem with just starting off with her and him just sort of reconnecting, and she's maybe nursing him back to health or some shit, and have that start off as the first scene. And then when the client shows up in her office somewhere off screen, she gets a phone call. She has to go. What's the problem with that? I don't know. It was just sort of weird the way they did this one. I don't know if they just didn't write it that way, or didn't film it that way, or didn't edit it that way. You never really know where the decisions are made in, the filmmaking process, and, things get changed, things get screwed up, or they don't work. So you have to be careful. So I'm not being judgmental, but I'm just saying that didn't really work too much for me. Episode 3, I really, really didn't like it, honestly. I had no chance to really connect with the clients, and maybe that's important for me because in the first season we were going at this from a very procedural angle. We had a lot of time to connect with our clients, and our clients were also dealing with issues that hit closer to home. You know, for example, there was the very first episode was about a soldier who was framed for murder, and his alibi. You know, he's like a highly ranked soldier. You know, sort of the poster boy for the Republican Party and for the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and everything, and he's supposed to be like the perfect man, and then his wife or aspiring wife gets murdered and he's framed for the murder, and he didn't do it, but his alibi exposes him as a gay male. And it brought up some very powerful issues of homosexuality, identity, sexual orientation, and the marriage or the meshing of one's social identity with one's personal identity. And maybe that's a little bit sociological because I am trained as a sociologist, but to me that was very impactful. It was a character that I could care about. It's a character that I could understand and sympathize with. I don't know what it's like to be a gay male in the Army, obviously, but there are a lot of men out there who do know that, and who might share some of his sentiments. There was another episode where oh my gosh, on the tip of my tongue. There's a mother, really high corporate, really high in the corporate industry, and inherited her business from her husband, who raised a selfish asshole of a son who was a rapist. And so she had to deal with whether or not she believed his stories, and then eventually ended up turning him in to the police. Excuse me. And I feel like that's a story that many women out there might be able to relate to, whose sons have turned out to be someone that they have no clue who he is, or they don't know how he got to be that way, and they're just in shock and in terror. There's another storyline about, a woman married to a very powerful general who's, sort of a murderer and a dictator, and she's not in love with him anymore because, he used to be one way and very idealistic, and then when he became general, he turned into this freaking monster, but she's afraid to leave him. You know what I'm saying? Because, she's like, you don't leave a man like that when, a man who makes people disappear when they disagree with him, you don't leave a man like that. That, I'm sure, resonates with many housewives out there who might have an abusive husband or who feel trapped in a marriage. I mean, there's so many of them out there. And I just felt like the first season with the clients, they were about actual stories of actual people, and gave us sort of this peephole or loophole for us to get into. Then we got more serialized towards the second season, and that was fine too, because we still had some stories in there. Some really great client stories were in there as well. So I say all that to say that this most recent client story, I just felt I wasn't really into it, and I don't think it wasn't the story itself. I think that the positioning of the client as a mother of a potential terrorist, I think that was a very, very interesting angle to go with. The problem I guess I had with it was that it was so melodramatic, the way that this was done. The mom, if you haven't seen the episode, stop watching now because I'm about to spoil it. The mother, who wants to know for sure whether or not the man that the CIA killed, she wanted to, because that was her son, she wanted to know for sure if her son was a terrorist. And they sealed his file, made it classified, black bag. No one could get in or out of that file, and she did not believe that her son was a terrorist. Turned out her son was not a terrorist, and the CIA or FBI, whoever gunned him down, they didn't necessarily, they made a mistake, but the reason why they covered up the death was not because they made a mistake, but because they're protecting other people. And you'll find out more about that if you watch the episode. But in order to get, the CIA or whoever to open the file, the mom straps herself with bombs and goes to this congressman's office and tries to threaten him and his 9 aides or whoever into, giving the file. And I just felt like, I don't know. Maybe she had been pushed to the edge or something. Maybe we would all do that if we were pushed to the edge. But I just felt like that was a little over the top for me and not necessarily believable. Maybe because we don't really know the mother that well, and we haven't seen her get progressively worse and worse and worse over time to the point where she got to this point. So that wasn't believable. There was a lot of screaming and yelling and just theatrics in this episode, and I felt like that wasn't really necessary. Maybe I just wanted something a little bit calmer and more character driven, because I do love character stories. I don't feel like we need to pile on the conspiracy after conspiracy after conspiracy every single episode. You know, we can spend some time with the characters and sort of see where they're coming from. And I felt as though this episode kind of took me out of the world of Scandal, and not in a good way, you know. And I also didn't really see sort of how this advanced the storyline. Not that every single episode needs to push things at a super fast rate, but I felt like I didn't really learn much of anything in this episode. Not about the plot, not about the characters, nothing new. And I think that's maybe a part of the reason why I wasn't feeling it. With every episode last season and the season before that of Scandal, you always learn something new about the characters, about the plot, about relationships between the characters, or about how people deal with certain issues and themes in their lives. You know what I'm saying? Because the clients were all very three-dimensional, with their own needs, their own desires, you know, their own compelling motivations or whatever. And this mother in this episode did have needs and desires, but I guess I just wasn't on the ride with her for whatever reason. I also didn't really understand a few things, like why did she get Pope and Associates involved in the whole situation if she didn't want Olivia to fix it? Did she lead Olivia into that room, into that situation on purpose? I don't think so, because the woman or the mother looked very surprised when Olivia burst into the office, and suddenly Olivia, for whatever reason, like, puts herself in the middle of this hostage crisis as like the martyr victim, and that sort of annoyed me a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that she wasn't like a good person for taking that on, but I guess I just didn't feel, I did not feel the crucible here. You know what I'm saying? The woman obviously, at least maybe from my understanding, the woman obviously did not hire Olivia to solve her problem. If she had, she would have let Olivia solve it herself. So I didn't really know why she got Pope and Associates involved in that. I don't know why Olivia got herself involved in that, and why she was so invested. Like, there was no connection between the two of them whatsoever, you know? So I didn't understand what the connections were. They were missing the crucible. I don't know if you guys have read James Frey's How to Write a Damn Good Novel. Ignore the fact that the guy, you know, made up a lot of his success for his other fiction book. But this nonfiction book he wrote called How to Write a Damn Good Novel is amazing. And he talks about the crucible. The crucible being that all the characters involved in a story, in an episode, in a situation, have to have a compelling reason to be there, where they don't have any way out, then they can't walk out of the door at any point in time. And they have to have a really good reason for walking into the door as well. You know, you don't just fall into a hostage situation unless somebody's literally taking you hostage, you know. I wouldn't walk into a hostage situation personally. Maybe that makes me a coward or not a hero, but I would have found a different way. That's just me. And I just did not understand why Olivia or the mother needed to go that route. I thought it would be far more interesting for Olivia to take on the mom's case and then try to crack open the congressman's and the senator's office, and try to get that file out. That would have been much more interesting as sort of like a very tense, slow-burning, dramatic storyline for the entire episode. I don't think we need a hostage situation.